We're staying in Italy, you'd be pleased to know. You'd have thought that the old lady of Italian football, Juventus, were kicking back, putting their feet up, watching Inter do all the...
Dotun wasn't talking about me there, but it's calling me old.
Flipping out. I'm lost for words. But take it whatever sense you want. Juventus is what I'm talking about. And they're not in the Champions League, so they should be looking at Inter doing all the heavy lifting for Italian football in Europe, putting their feet up and wiping the floor with the opposition. But they suffered their biggest defeat in a generation against Atalanta over the last weekend. 4-0. How do we explain that?
Yeah, it's a story in two parts. Obviously, you don't lose to 4-0 without your opponents being good. Atalanta are, when they're on song, they can be like this. We know that. Some of the goals they scored were really brilliant.
And it could have been more.
Yeah, absolutely. Could have been more. Probably should have been more. But it is really, I think, definitely difficult not to look at that from the Juventus perspective and say, how have we got here? Because there was so much optimism at the start of the season around Motta. I thought he was a great appointment. It felt like all this time when there's been this great existential battle, it's felt like, for the soul of Juventus between are we just trying to get back to being a winning team, and are we okay with Max Allegri's ruthless pragmatism, or are we trying to build a new identity like they tried to do when they brought in Andrea Pirlo as manager? And they were like, no, we want to be young, we want to play creative football. It was kind of what they tried to do with Sarri as well. And Motta felt like this perfect hitting everything, because look, he's just had this incredible season at Bologna. He's done something that we didn't imagine that Bologna could even do getting into the Champions League, and he's playing a brand of football that is so modern and new. We've just been talking about Filippo Inzaghi and his Inter tactics and how fluid they are. I mean, that's absolutely not literally the same playbook, but it's the same sphere we're talking about. Coaches who are trying to embrace the modern in football and step into it. And it felt like it could be this perfect match. They spent buckets of money to try and support him. I think it was about 160 million in the summer, and then another nearly 50 in January as well to top it up. And broadly speaking, it's just not working. The results are nowhere near where you think they should be. And to come into this game against Juventus before kickoff were considering themselves a title contender, a title rival. They'd been on this little nice run of form domestically. They'd won 5 in a row, I think it was, and they started to feel like, oh, we're back within 6 points of the league, the summit. We can actually be in the title conversation.
Yeah, David Cartledge introduced that ghost at the feast a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh, please say it's not true.
and really, as Andy was saying, 4-0, if anything, flatters them. It's a pretty ugly point for Motta to be at.
I guess the question is, right, Nicky, if you're talking about a rebuild and a rethink, how much do you have the right to expect? That's the question. For me, if you're seeing progress, if you're betting in a team and you're qualifying for the Champions League, all of which are still eminently possible, then I think that's okay. But the problem is that coaching Juventus is a little bit like, say, coaching a Chelsea or a Manchester United in a transitional period. And Ruben Amorim's talked about this a little bit, hasn't he? The fact is that you can say we're in a rebuild, there's going to be progress, it might be incremental, it might take time, all those sort of things. But because you're such a big club, shutting out the noise so you can actually work and get on with it is so difficult to do. You need the results along the way to give yourself room to work. That's the problem there. I think there's been so much in this Juventus season, and maybe it's difficult to see after this defeat. There's been so, and particularly after the eliminations in the Champions League and the Coppa Italia, to, let's be honest, 2 teams they should have beaten. It's difficult to remember now the bit in the first part of the season where they played unbelievable football in the first Champions League game against PSV Eindhoven in the groups. The comeback against Leipzig. And some of the moments in the league, the fact that they've been difficult to beat and they've played some quite interesting football. Obviously, it's been really uneven because they've defended really well for lots of the season as you would expect Motta to get them to do. And then they've defended appallingly in other games. Is this unevenness not just something we need to accept if Juventus are going to move on? Because say they fire Thiago Motta now, which is not off the table, is it?
Not at all, no.
If they fire him now, are they just going like 3-4 steps backward? How does that take them any closer to where they want to be?
Yeah, and I think we're so extreme. We're always at one pillar or another when we're talking about Juventus, because again, before this game, Juventus back in the title race. They've got it back to 6 points. They've won 5 games in a row. About 5 games in a row, they beat Inter. They won away to Como, who've been really good recently. Cesc Fabregas has got something going down there. They played some good football. And then we go straight to the other extreme, which is Motta out, basically. And that conversation is very real. You literally had videos at the end of this game of fans on the concourse singing for Max Allegri. Think how unpopular he'd got with fans by a certain point. So the extremes on this are real. This is not us sitting in a room making it up. That's in the fan base. That's in the atmosphere in Turin. But I think there's definitely a really reasonable, different perspective you can take on this, which is things could be better. But Thiago Motta is, to counter the conversation about Inter before, second youngest average starting 11 in Serie A. Some players who've come through who are young footballers who've had some ups and some downs. I mean, I think there's been some real positives. I think Kefren Turam looks like he's developing into a really nice footballer. I think Yildiz has had some great moments, but he's also had some lows. Muani's an interesting one because, of course, you need to make that deal permanent, but has a lot of potential. I think some of the things that I want to be most critical of the club for aren't Motta's fault, which is why are we letting someone as plainly talented and who's going on to thrive in the Premier League this season, like Dean Huijsen, leave the club and then having to bring in someone who, in my opinion,
is nowhere near as good as
Lloyd Kelly.
Yeah.
So that we could spend, I'm saying we here, just to stress here, I'm just saying we because of the bigger conversation, definitely not my team, but yes. But why are you spending all that money on Douglas Luiz, who's been one of the most disappointing of their signings? Coop Miners, look, I would have at the start of the season said Coop Miners is one of the players I was most enthusiastic about in Serie A. I thought it was a great signing. I thought he was a player who was really going in a great direction, but he's had a difficult season. Motta would go to bat for him and say all sorts of positive things for him. But look, yes, I think there's definitely a way you can look at this, which is actually they've torn the whole thing up. And if anyone perhaps deserves to have a bit of scrutiny, is it the directors making those decisions rather than the manager trying to put it all together?
I mean, this is the thing straight away. If you're looking at this game with Atalanta, it's why such a poor comparison. Because Atalanta are about continuity, stability. They've made more playing changes than they would have wanted to originally make this season, and largely they've worked for them. But that's because you've got Gasperini there, who's been there forever, right?
If Juventus hadn't lost at home to Atalanta 4-0, like I say, the biggest loss at home for such a long time, would Thiago Motta's job have been in jeopardy nevertheless?
Yeah, so again, I'm trying, I feel like because I've just argued the case in support of him, it sounds like I'm going from one pillar to the other, and I'm trying not to. I do try to trying to give everyone an overview here, because it's not as simple as that, right? They also had this huge long undefeated start to the season in which sure they were undefeated, but there were so many draws, and so many of those draws were really not entertaining to watch. I think maybe that's one of the things that fans feel in their frustration is, well, we were at least supposed to get more entertaining football. If we're not getting more entertaining football and the results are worse, which they are, his points per game are, I think, the lowest since Del Neri was in charge.
1.71.
Yeah, we can be realistic about that. The points per game are bad. For
Wasn't
Juventus.
expecting Del Neri to get a mention in this section.
Yeah, well,
Please carry on.
Yeah.
So they aren't good. But I think I was just making the whole case of the other side, because I do think there is nuance here. I think there absolutely is nuance, and Juventus have banged on for ages about wanting to do this renewal and make a younger squad. You've got your younger squad. It's happening. There's still big problems there, and there's problems there that are predate this even this set of decision makers at board level making decisions, because Dusan Vlahovic is one of your problems. Dusan Vlahovic has not in any way lived up to his price tag. And that's a problem that you're still dealing with now that was made before you came in. So there's
But
lots
the
to it.
scudetto race is over for
So over.
Juventus,
I don't personally think it was ever on, but it was in the media conversation that it was on. And Motta told us after the game at the weekend that no more talking about that, basically.